The pitch was going perfectly until my brother walked through the door. I was mid-sentence, standing at the head of the conference table in our 32nd floor office, presenting our Q3 projections to representatives from Meridian Capital. The kind of investors who don't take meetings twice. 14 months of work, 40 slides, and in walks my brother, my mother right behind him, my father closing the door like he owned the building. I looked at my brother. I looked at the Meridian team, then I smiled, set down my laser pointer and said, "Give me 2 minutes." I already knew what they wanted. I had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. My name is Claire, I'm 31 years old, and I am the founder and CEO of Lumen Analytics, a B2B software company I built from a spare bedroom in a 1-bedroom apartment in Austin, Texas. We now have 43 employees, 2 Fortune 500 clients, and a valuation that would make most people my age need to sit down. I did not inherit seed money. I did not have a safety net. What I had was a computer science degree, 12-hour days, and the very specific kind of fuel that comes from a family who told you that you were wasting your time. My family cut ties with me when I was 27. It wasn't dramatic the way people imagine. There was no screaming match, no slammed door, no single moment I can point to. It was a slow, deliberate withdrawal. The kind that leaves bruises you can't show anyone. My brother Marcus had always been the one my parents poured everything into. Private tutors, a business degree paid in full, an introduction to every contact my father had spent 30 years cultivating. Marcus was going to be the success story. That was decided before either of us was old enough to have a say in it. I was the younger sister who asked too many questions, who got a scholarship instead of asking for tuition, who chose a technical field my mother called not very feminine, and who, at 24, turned down my father's offer to come work at his commercial real estate firm. He had built that firm over 20 years. He wanted both his children inside it. I understood what it meant to him. I said no anyway because I already had a plan, and the plan wasn't commercial real estate. My father didn't speak to me for 2 months after that conversation. When he did, it was to tell me that if I was determined to go my own way, I should be prepared to go it completely alone. I said I understood. My mother cried. She was very good at crying at strategic moments. Marcus called me selfish. He said I was embarrassing the family by rejecting what my father had offered. He said that if my little app idea failed, and it would fail, he was confident about that, I shouldn't expect anyone to catch me. I told him I didn't plan on falling. For the next 3 years, I barely heard from any of them. A text on my birthday. Once. A brief call at Christmas where my mother told me Marcus had just been made a VP at my father's firm, as if I had asked. I sent a card when my parents' anniversary came around. I didn't call, neither did they. We had reached a kind of polite mutual silence that everyone pretended was not what it actually was, which was abandonment, dressed up in manners. I want to be honest about what those 3 years were like, because I think people imagine that high-functioning people don't feel these things. I felt them. I felt them at 2 a.m. when a server crashed and I had no one to call. I felt them the morning our first enterprise contract came through, and I sat alone in my apartment and didn't know who to tell. I got good at filling silence with work. I got very, very good at work. By the time I was 30, Lumen Analytics had 10 employees and had just closed our Series A. By the time I was 31, we were preparing to close a Series B with Meridian Capital, which would bring in $22 million and position us for an acquisition offer that was already being discussed in rooms I wasn't technically supposed to know about yet. That was the week my father called. I didn't recognize the number at first. He was calling from his office line, not his cell. I found out later that was intentional. He thought I might not pick up if I saw his name. He was right. "Claire," he said, like no time had passed at all, like 3 years of silence was just a long weekend. "Dad," I said. He told me he'd been following the news about Lumen. He said he was proud of me. He used that word, proud. And something in my chest went very still, the way it does just before something breaks. He said the family had been talking, and that they felt it was time to reconnect. He said Marcus had some ideas he wanted to share with me. Good ideas, he said. Mature, strategic ideas. I asked what kind of ideas. He said Marcus thought there might be a role for him at Lumen. A senior role. Something at the co-founder or partner level, given that he had years of business development experience from the firm. He said it as if this were a reasonable thing to say, as if 3 years of silence was a reasonable price to pay for a co-founder title at a company you had never worked a single day at. I told my father I would think about it. I did not think about it. What I did was call my attorney. Her name is Sandra and she has been with me since the beginning. Back when my legal budget was approximately zero and she took a chance on a 25-year-old. With a pitch deck and a dream. I told Sandra what my father had said. I told her I had a feeling it was going to get more complicated before it got simpler. She told me to document everything and let her know if any written requests came through. The next call was from Marcus. He didn't bother with small talk. He said he'd heard I was closing a big round and he wanted to be a part of it. He said he had been thinking about pivoting out of real estate and into tech, and that Lumen was the obvious vehicle for that. He said, and I want to be precise here because the phrasing matters, that it would look better for the company to have a male co-founder with business credentials alongside me for the institutional investor process. I held the phone for a long moment after he said that. Say that again, I said. He said it would be more credible. That institutional investors of this scale like to see balanced leadership. That he wasn't trying to be offensive, he was just being realistic about how these rooms work, and I should appreciate that he was being honest with me. I told Marcus I would be in touch. My mother called the following day. She was gentler about it, which somehow made it worse. She said she'd missed me. She said the family had made mistakes. She said Marcus was really talented and just needed the right opportunity. And wasn't it wonderful that I was in a position to give it to him? She said family takes care of family. She said she knew I hadn't forgotten that. What she didn't know was that I was taking notes. What none of them knew was that 2 weeks before my father's call, I had received a tip from a former colleague of Marcus's, a woman named Joanna who had worked alongside him at my father's firm for 4 years. Joanna had reached out to congratulate me on Lumen's growth, and somewhere in that conversation, almost as an aside, she mentioned that Marcus had been telling people in their professional circle that he was involved in Lumen's early development, that he had advised me in the formative stages, that the company's core product architecture had been built on ideas the two of them had developed together. None of that was true. Marcus had never once advised me on anything related to Lumen. He had never seen our product architecture. The closest he had come to our office was the LinkedIn message he sent me in year 1 that said, and I quote, "Hope the app thing works out." I asked Joanna if she could give me anything in writing. She said she could. So when Marcus walked into my conference room during the Meridian Capital pitch, when he walked in with my mother and my father like they were arriving at a business meeting they had every right to attend. I had already been to Sandra's office twice that week. I had Joanna's written statement. I had screenshots of every message Marcus had sent to his professional contacts, implying involvement with my company. I had a cease and desist ready to file. What I did not have was a scene. I pulled my family into the small conference room down the hall, and I closed the door. The Meridian team waited. They were professionals. They could wait 5 minutes. My father spoke first. He said this wasn't how they'd wanted it to happen. He said they tried to reach me through proper channels, which I interpreted to mean the phone calls I had responded to without enthusiasm, and that they felt showing up in person was the only way I would take them seriously. He said all they wanted was a conversation. My mother nodded. She looked around the conference room. I could see her doing the math on the square footage. Marcus looked directly at me and said, "I want a co-founder title and equity commensurate with the value I would bring to the Series B close. I've done the research. 10% is a reasonable ask. 10%. Of a company he had never worked for. Of a valuation he had contributed precisely nothing to. You want 10% of Lumen," I said. "It's fair," he said. "I have business development contacts that could accelerate your growth by." "Marcus," I said, "you told your colleagues at the firm that you helped build this company." The room went quiet. "You told people you advised on the product architecture. You told at least one person that we developed the core concept together." I set my phone on the table between us. "I have that in writing." My mother started to say something. My father put his hand on her arm. Marcus said. That's not. I was just explaining the family connection. I didn't say I built it. I have the messages, I said. I have them saved, my attorney has copies. His face did something complicated. He looked at my father. My father looked at me. For a moment, he looked like the person I remembered from before all of this. Tired. A little lost. Someone who had wanted things to go differently and didn't know how to say so. Then he straightened and said, Claire, we are family. There's no need to involve attorneys. I involved an attorney, I said. The day you called to tell me Marcus deserved a senior role at my company. Deserved is a strong word. You said he had ideas, strategic ideas. I looked at my brother. Marcus, you failed your Series 7 licensing exam. Twice. You've been passed over for promotion at the firm 3 times in 4 years. I know this because Dad's administrative assistant has been keeping me updated. I hadn't planned to say that last part. But the expression on my father's face was worth it. You told me to go it alone, I said, more quietly now. I went alone. I built this. I built every piece of it. The architecture, the client pipeline, the team, the investor relationships, every single part of what is happening in that conference room right now exists because I worked for it for 4 years without a single dollar or phone call from this family. I picked up my phone from the table. So no, Marcus does not get 10%. He does not get 1%. He does not get a title, a desk, a business card, or an introduction. And if I see one more message to your professional contacts implying any involvement with Lumen Analytics, Sandra files the cease and desist before end of business the same day. My mother said, You would really do that? To your own brother? I looked at her for a long moment. Mom, I said. You told me I was wasting my time. You told me I should come home and work with Dad and stop embarrassing Marcus by succeeding at things he hadn't thought of first. You were quiet for 3 years. I learned to be fine with that. I am fine with that. I stood up. I have investors waiting. My father said, Claire, I'll have Sandra send over the formal communication, I said. Please don't come back to this office. I walked back down the hall. I straightened my jacket. I opened the conference room door and smiled at the Meridian team and said, I'm so sorry for the interruption. Where were we? We closed the round 3 weeks later. The cease and desist went out the morning after my family's visit. Sandra had it ready. Marcus's attorney responded with a letter suggesting there had been a misunderstanding about informal family conversations, which is a very expensive way of saying he had no ground to stand on. The messaging stopped. The implied co-founder narrative disappeared from his professional profiles within 48 hours. My father called once more, about a month later. He did not mention equity or titles. He said he hoped I was well. He said the firm was doing fine. He said my mother had started a garden. He talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular, and I listened. And at the end of the call he said, I know we got a lot of things wrong. I told him I appreciated him saying that. I don't know what comes next with my family. I'm not angry in the way I used to be. The hot, constant kind of angry that I carried around for years without realizing it was the weight that was slowing me down. Putting it down didn't mean forgiving everything. It meant I finally had both hands free. What I know is this. I built Lumen Analytics because I had to, and because I wanted to, and because somewhere underneath all of that I wanted to prove to them, to myself, I'm still not always sure which, that the path they told me was a waste of time led somewhere worth going. It led to the 32nd floor. It led to $22 million and 43 people who show up every morning because they believe in what we built. It led to the moment I walked back into that conference room with my head level and my hands steady, and closed the most important deal of my career, while my family was still standing in the elevator lobby, figuring out what had just happened. I don't need them to understand it. I just need them to know it's mine.